So I think schedules are important, and we're going to talk today about how schedules could work for you and maybe and also why they haven't. So I'm asking you to start today with something about a schedule that works for you because I'd like to kind of lean into the positive to get started before we start dealing with some of the issues around scheduling. We got a couple more people here. Wonderful. Mary Kay, hi. Crystal, you're clueless. Okay, I'm glad you're here. Michael from Puerto Rico, hi. Elaine, welcome. Sandra, Lotta from snowy Finland. Ooh, Angela, I schedule time for transitions between tasks. I love to plan. I think that is so important, transition time. I think a lot of us don't actually make time for transitions, and I certainly didn't used to do that when I was younger. So I appreciate your bringing that up. I'm actually writing it down right now because it's so important. Um, Let's see. Elizabeth, Liz from West Tennessee. Mary Kay, writing it down helps, but following it is a whole other deal. Yes, I can really appreciate that. I think that we can have, really lofty ideas about what we want to do in our schedules, and then when we actually have to do it, that would be great. Let's see, Michael, I just lay out what I want to do, but without time constraints. So is that your first thing that you do and then you add the time into it? I'm curious about that because I think that's really interesting. That's an interesting way to go about it. For me, I often do a brain dump and then of everything that I have to do, and then I assign time to it, and sometimes that can be discouraging. Hi, Lynn from Norfolk. So I wanted to start today with some quotes. So I decided that I would look up, does anyone else who, maybe famous people who have problems with scheduling or have tips to help us improve our scheduling. And amazingly, Brainy Quote, thank you so much, had a number of quotes about scheduling. And there were a few that were so apropos, so to the point of what we're doing here. And the first one came from Nora Ephron, the famous author and screenwriter who is deceased. And she says, I go through periods where I work a great deal at all hours of the day when I'm around a typewriter. And then I go through spells where I don't do anything. I just sort of have lunch all day. I never have been able to stick to a schedule. I work when there is something due or when I'm really excited about a piece. Wow. It makes me wonder if she might have had ADHD. And so I'm curious, does anyone relate to what she's saying, that you are able to stick to doing something when there's a time deadline or you're excited about it, but the rest of the time it's hard to follow a schedule? Michael says, time constraints stress me. I haven't used them in years. I'm curious, what do you do then to stay on task if you're not using time? Gina says, I definitely can relate. Mary Kay, yes. Michael, yes. So I think that's so interesting, Crystal, definitely. Because, when she says, I have never been able to stick to a schedule, I work when there is something due, or I'm really excited about a piece. To me, that gives like permission. If Nora Ephron, who wrote, Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail and so many other great films, did this, wow. And she's able to be so successful, we could all actually give ourselves a little more slack around scheduling. So schedules involve several executive functioning skills simultaneously. And that would include time management, that would include impulse control, organization, prioritizing, emotional regulation, and of course, metacognition, a self-evaluation, the awareness of ourselves. And I think that's a real challenge for a lot of us that with time and struggling with time blindness, which I'll talk about soon, it's harder to sort of, there's a slippery quality, as my friend Ari Tuckman says, to time. And that can be challenging. So let's look a little bit about some of these executive functioning skills that affect scheduling, and then we're going to talk about how to schedule and how to create routines. So a schedule, really involves our ability to understand and use time appropriately. And this is a key executive functioning skill, time management, and luckily it's very teachable because it's a conscious skill. It's what we call a hot skill. And it responds well to direct instruction. And of course, time management, as well as many other executive functioning skills like planning, initiation, goal-directed persistence, and motivation, are all the time management affects all of those, and many people have a desire to succeed but then are derailed by their natural ADHD challenges with distractibility, focus, and perseverance. For kids and adults with ADHD whose brains run on a now, not now internal clock, we can struggle with how to grasp how 15 minutes feels different than an hour. We're cultivating these nuances depending on our practice, our maturity, and of course, a lot of training. And today, I was using my time timer and I actually moved it away because it was not helping me at all, because I wanted to spend like 30 minutes on my emails and then get down to other stuff. But I had each email required several actions attached to it. And so I would set it for 30 minutes and it would go off and I'd be like, oh, darn, I'm not finished yet. And then I'd set it again and I'm still not finished. This happened like 3 times. And finally I was like, I'm not setting it anymore until my timer goes off for when I have to leave for an appointment. And that's what I ended up doing because I felt frustrated because I couldn't estimate how long it took to get through some of these more complicated emails. So let's see. We have Tyler says, Mary Kay says, I will procrastinate and then be super productive when the deadline is near. Many of us do that. Tyler, hello, says, I set alarms ahead of events on my smartphone calendar and sometimes make to-do lists, but I don't always prioritize or prepare properly. I don't always have the best routine and sometimes I'm late. I hear you on that. Hello, Georgia from Rome. Welcome. Angela says, I'm self-employed and have and I homeschool, so I have to have structure to be able to be creative within the structure. Wow, that is a lot to take on. I just want to pause and say, oh my gosh, I'm so impressed. If I'm too uptight about scheduling, I fail and go into low self-esteem. Oh, thank you. Your videos have helped me so much. I bought several analog clocks to put around my house, and I've been setting alarms to remind myself of upcoming appointments when I remember. Thank you so much, Angela. That's so sweet. You're welcome, Georgia. I'm happy to be here for that. Angela says, what trips me up is all of my planning. Takes so much time, hours. It's worth it. It cuts down on my anxiety, but planning time can be a black hole. Absolutely. And what happens is you spend a lot of time like transferring something from one schedule to another, from one list to another, and then you're kind of stuck. Thank you, Angela, for saying that. Hello, Veronica. Lynn says, I'm to the point of overwhelmed, and then I can't make any logical decisions anymore. I have overwhelm on the topic to discuss today, so that's great. All right, thank you all for your great comments. So I want to share another quote, actually, and this is from the author Annie Dillard, who is a native New Englander, and she says, a schedule defends from chaos and whim. It's a net for catching days. It is a scaffolding on which a worker can stand and labor with both hands at sections of time. Isn't that so interesting? A schedule defends from chaos and whim. And how I would translate it is that having schedules can keep us grounded, particularly for people who have a lot of interests. You know, we with neurodivergent brains, life is like a constant buffet, and our plates are a little bit smaller than we would like. And so we're trying to figure out what we want to put on the plate and what we need to take off. So I like this idea of that. So let's talk a little bit about this now, not now brain that we have, and what people tend to do is either underestimate how long something's going to take and do it at the last minute, or frantically race to finish it. Excuse me. So we underestimate how long something will take and do it at the last minute, frantically racing to finish it, or we overestimate how much time it will take, feel overwhelmed, and don't start at all. And both of these patterns can drive us crazy and can be difficult for people we live with, partners, for bosses, supervisors, even for our kids. Growing up, I believe that my mother had undiagnosed ADHD, and probably still does. And I remember she was never on time to pick me up. Not like, oh, sometimes I'm on time. Never. And I remember being somewhere like after a play rehearsal and like sitting on the curb at my high school. I was, I don't know, maybe in ninth grade, and everybody's parents had picked them up, and I was still there. It was horrible. And of course, in those days, because I was born in the dark ages, there were no cell phones. So I just had to wait. And then when I got tired of waiting, I could try to call a number that she might answer or she might not. So that was really tough. And so I didn't really learn how to manage time. And I do think you're right, Angela, that people see time management as a moral failing. Like if you struggle with time, then there's something actually wrong with you, rather than actually you struggle with it. It's just time is hard to grasp. Okay, so the first thing that we want to think about before we even get to scheduling, when we talk about time, is shifting our points of view. Because most people think about time from the front end. I have to drop my kids off at school, and then I'm going to need to get coffee, and then I have to be at work by 9. And so I'm thinking forwards in terms of how I'm going to manage my time. And this means I have to be at work by 9, and I have to get dressed and eat breakfast and brush my teeth, this approach increases stress, decreases productivity, and leads to underestimating how long something takes. So instead, what I want to encourage you to do is to actually flip your perspective. And what do I mean by that? What does it mean to flip your perspective? Easier said than done, Sharon, right? I want to explain that. Sorry. So consider working backwards, right? So this is what we call backwards design, by starting with the end goal and then allocating time accordingly. So for me, I have to be at a friend's house for dinner tonight around 6-ish. And the ish is always a problem for me. People say, oh yeah, come around 6-ish. I'm like, what does that mean? Do you want me at 6? Can I come at 6:15? What if I get there at 6:30? Are you going to be mad at me? I don't know. I don't know how to deal with ish. So tell me what time I need to be there, and I will be there at that time. Mostly. So when we flip our perspective, this is how it works. I have to be at my friend's house at 6. It takes about 10 minutes to drive there. Probably 15, but I'm going to give myself 10 because I can arrive at 6:05. I need to gather up everything that I'm making for dinner, which is I'm bringing all the potatoes and some cheese for hors d'oeuvres, and I'm making the apple crisp, but I'm going to bake it at her house. And then I need to drive there. So let's think about this. So it's going to take 10-ish minutes to leave. So that's now 5:50. I have to put everything together for the cooking. That's going to take me 20 minutes. That's 5:30. And I also want to wrap things up from my week of seeing clients and, tidy up my desk a little bit. That's going to take another 15 minutes. And I want to set up my schedule for next week so I can check that off my list. So that's another 15 minutes. So I have to start at 5 o'clock to get everything done. And I think this has really helped me. And I always give myself more time than I think I need because I underestimate how long things take. I am a chronic time underestimator. I think it's going to always take less time than it actually takes. I'm not proud of that, but I do that. And so that since I know that about myself, I'm using metacognitive awareness to say you are a chronic time underestimator, then I have to give myself more time at everything. I can't say it's going to take 10 minutes to pull all that food together. Even if it does take 10 minutes, fantastic. Then I've earned myself some extra time to go through my mail. But I can't say that because otherwise it won't happen that way. And then I'll feel bad, really bad. And I'll also increase my own level of stress by rushing around, which doesn't help your blood pressure. So that is what backwards design looks like. And it benefits us because it teaches us and reteaches us how to estimate time, how to develop the ability to sequence events, and improve our planning and prioritizing. So this is where if you happen to have a partner who's good at time, or a friend who's good at time, or a coach, or a therapist, or a colleague, they might be able to give you some tips. Oh, I do it this way, and this is what what I've noticed it actually takes to do this, not what I think it is. Having conversations about time can be very illuminating and also very helpful. Bonita says, besides just being horrible at scheduling, practically daily sudden fatigue crashes interrupt my days. This Wednesday at 5 p.m. I was almost home but in tears because of mental exhaustion. Thank you for saying that. Holly says, I'm always late and my kids hate it and I feel really bad, but it's hard to change it. And my friends say, you tell us, but you'll be here at 1, but I end up being there at 5. So for people who struggle with time in the way that you do, Holly, I think it's important actually not to actually practice to promise, what you can and cannot do. And I think what we want to do is start with what is one aspect of time that you would like to change immediately. Mary Kay says, don't rush me or I'm bound to forget something. It's better if I can plan my time. Right, exactly. So, if you want me to bring 3 things for the dinner, please text me and let me know what they are because I can't be guaranteed I'm going to remember them tomorrow or today when I have to bring them. So, let's see. We've talked about a backwards design. So I'm curious for any of you, do any of you use backwards design? Does it help you? Is it hard for you to estimate what you're doing, like how long things are going to take? Or have you just kind of decided you're just going to use alarms and alerts and you're not going to estimate at all? So do you use backwards design? How has it helped you? If it hasn't helped you, why is it frustrating? And what do you use instead? Okay, I'll put that in the chat because that's a lot of questions. Do you Okay, so I put it in there. So do you use backwards design? And if so, how does it help? I never did that, and I think it would help me. I think it would help you too, Holly. So let's transition a little bit to talking about overwhelm freeze, okay? When we have too much to do, or we create a staggering brain dump like this list I made for myself, which is really horrible. I just want to say this is a horrible list. Don't do this. I've taken that list and I've moved it online to a much nicer list, which has like when things are due, when I'm working on them, and then a big place to write done. But when we look at this list, it's kind of like our brain sees a tiger in the jungle. So you know that I've talked before about how the amygdala fight, flight, or freeze works, and so when we see this this list, it's like seeing a tiger, and our brains kind of shut down. They're like, who can do that? I can't even read it. It's illegible. No one can do it. I don't know what goes first, what's important. Forget it. And I'm going to go have a cup of coffee and read the paper. That would be much better. So what we want to do is to really kind of think about the tasks and activities that the amount of tasks and activities, that we're asking ourselves to do feels overwhelming, and it's threatening. And so anxiety fosters this freeze from an amygdala response in a way like I'm in danger. And frustration, yours or someone else's, can increase the stress that increases this process. And then we have trouble with organization and prioritizing and doing things step by step. So overwhelm freeze is related to intense stress based on weaker executive functioning skills that impact planning, arranging, formulating, and executing. The brain experiences your to-do list as a threat, so the body will react accordingly, fight, flight, or freeze. Most likely, we are either going to say, no way, I'm going to go out and go shopping, or I'm going to take a walk, or go for a run, or watch TV, or I'm just going to shut down and not do it. Like I'm just going to ignore this list and do what I want to do. Because these high stress levels are based on a belief that you can't do all of those things. And that's fair because you can't. You can't, right? So I agree with Michael, who says, I'm a list maker, easing my mental load. Right, because for me, if it's on my list, then I don't have to worry about whether I'm carrying it around in my brain. One of my clients, who I had to teach how to make lists and why it was important, used to say, well, I have to keep it in my head. If it's not in my head, then I'm not going to do it. And the problem was things didn't stay in his head. So he was constantly overwhelmed. And Holly says, yes, you're overwhelmed a lot, and that's when your anxiety kicks in. And you probably get overwhelmed easily, as many of us do. And so we want to slow the process down. So let's talk about what to do when we are overwhelmed. Before I do that, though, I want to say something. Challenges with working memory: you can't hold information in your brain and perform a task on it with ease, or you have trouble pulling up an experience from the past, something that you learned, and applying it to the present. These issues with working memory make it harder for us to manage our emotions in these situations, because working memory is fundamentally linked to emotional control. And so what happens is here, it's harder to perform a task, whether it's prioritizing or organizing or time management, because we're flooded by intense feelings of stress or anxiety or just that shutdown. So we have to work on and I saw someone said that they use this a lot, the urgent and important matrix, which I have, I think, shared with you before. And of course, it's also called the Eisenhower matrix. And so that what's useful about that is in that matrix, excuse me, you are frequently asking yourself what is urgent and what is important. Excuse me. And urgent has to do with time pressure, and important is a value. So the key to prioritize what's on your is the key is to determine, how am I going to slow things down? How am I going to zoom out? How am I going to organize my tasks, not only in terms of deadlines, but maybe in terms of categories? So if I have a couple of errands, how could I organize those so it makes sense in terms of the flow of where I'm going in my walking or driving to my different errands? I don't want to go here and come back here and then go back there and come back. I want to kind of go out there, do the errands that are over there, and then come back over here and do the errands that are here. Something like that. So Stephen Covey, who is really a brilliant man and has worked and been a manager, run things at the Kripalu Institute here in Western Massachusetts, says the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. I thought that is so interesting. How many of us would love to just flip our schedule into not what we have to do, but what we really want to do? And that is somewhat of an impossible task, not totally, but in today's world, we often have to do things before we want to do things. And so this is what we need to do in order to do that. How are you going to organize your tasks? I really do believe that creating some sort of chart of the act, the task, when it's due, when you're going to work on it, and if it's complete is very, very helpful. You can also put a column in for how long you think it'll take you. I think having some way of managing our own activities, feeling a sense of connection to them and personal responsibility is important. So you can do a brain dump that looks like that horrible list I just showed you, and then I take that list and I break it down. Okay, these are related to things that are due next week. I'm going to put that in the top of the chart. These are things that are due the following week. That goes next. There's something urgent that's due tomorrow. That's going to go to the top. And so then I can move it around and work on it so it makes sense to me. So we want to gain perspective on our tasks by addressing our expectations and our failures and our fears of failure. Our fears of failure. Because we mostly think that we're going to fail at something instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to risk success. Because you might not fail, you might actually do it. And where does that fit into your mindset? So that's part of that flipping. We want to flip to a mindset of, I am going to get stuff done, and I'm someone who can do things. I may be only able to do them 3 things per day, but I can do those 3 things. And that's part of the challenge, which is to actually set up a schedule for yourself of things that you can actually accomplish. Because we set up these schedules or these lists and then we can't accomplish them and they overwhelm us. So if you're someone who likes to do a brain dump of 20 things and then schedule that for your week and break it down to 4 things a day, fantastic. If you're someone who looks at that list of 20 items and is already heading into the freeze, oh my God, there's a tiger, then you need to take that list and make it a smaller list in terms of what's most urgent. So let's look at some comments here. We have some very interesting comments here. Hold on. Okay. All right. Mary Kay says, yes, having it in writing like a text so I can refer back is best, or I'll probably forget about it or some detail about it. Exactly. So if you want me to do something for you, text it to me or send me an email, and then I can actually look at it and transfer it to my own list. Gina, I think I used to do that, but now I'm unsure to do that. I'm not sure how I lost the ability. Gina, what would it take for you to be able to do that? To either ask people to send the request to you in writing, or to use backwards design, to start at the end point and work your way there by subtracting how much time things take. What would have to happen for you to do that? Veronica, you've never heard of backwards design. You've always made lists. Okay, I'd like to hear more about the lists you make, Veronica. Becca, I use backwards design to be on time for my appointments, and it does help. However, I don't use it for other tasks. Why not, Becca? What gets in the way for using backwards design on some of your other tasks? Yes, and I just want to say it is wonderful for you to be on time for appointments. I can't say that is always true for me. Alan said, I fought my ADHD, anxiety, and depression through the help of. Okay, forget that. I'm a list maker, easing your mental load. I feel overwhelmed all the time. When your anxiety kicks in, you get overwhelmed. Bonnie says, I've never used backwards design. I can believe I can get ready for work in X time, but something always trips me up. Food, clothes, bags, prepared the night before. Morning comes and it all looks good, but then I can't find my coat or my keys. Holly. Holly says, I get so overwhelmed that there are days when I don't want to come out of my room because my anxiety kicks in and then the depression comes. Right. And so, Holly, the number one, antidote, a treatment for overwhelm is breaking things down. Small pieces, very small chunks. No size is too small, right? So when you're having a day where you feel like everything is overwhelming, maybe think about what is one thing that you would like to do today, one small thing, or even write down a list of 3 things from smallest, super smallest to small, and then see how that would help you. Tyler, sometimes I do use backwards design on my smartphone calendar. It does help, but it can be hard to estimate a time the task will take. Yes, I hear you. If I haven't done it before, it can be hard to estimate the time a task will take that I haven't done before. So in those cases, we have to, give a general estimate. Okay, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes. If I need more than 20 minutes, then I'm going to come back to it at a later date. Because you can't estimate always how long something will take if you've never done it before. I agree with you, Tyler. Sometimes, I need to work to improve my backwards design on longer term tasks that take more planning, scheduling, and work times, so I don't end up procrastinating and going into an amygdala adrenaline dump too close to the deadline. Right, and so what happens when we get close to the deadline, the reason that it works is because cortisol, our adrenaline, rushes into our brains and stimulates our brains to do the work. It stimulates all areas, all the neurotransmitters, and you're basically running on fumes. Tyler, attempts to use the urgent and important matrix on a whiteboard haven't resulted in a planned schedule. What tips do you have to take the matrix and turn it into a schedule? So one of the things that I think would be helpful when you are making a schedule is perhaps to create like 3 columns. The task, and whether it's urgent or important, and or you could just write the tasks down and then use some highlighters. Yellow is for urgent, orange is for important. But I think it does help if we can, in the matrix, urgent and important are things that are crises, emergencies. We have to do them right away. That's quadrant 1, and you could put stuff in quadrant 1. In quadrant 2 are things that we want to work on, projects that we have time to plan for. In quadrant 3, these are distractions, things that take us away, interruptions. And so these are things that we might want to write that we don't want to do. And quadrant 4 are things that are not urgent and not important. And those are things that usually we don't get to, but maybe on a rainy day we might. And so we can put some of those things in, like, I actually want to clean out the linen closet. Okay. You may get to it, maybe not. We'll see. It's not critical if you do or you don't. Let's see. Becca said, Holly, Becca, I hate it and my son doesn't understand it. My son plays basketball and it really upsets me because there are times I can't go and I don't want to miss anything with him, so I'm trying my best. Good for you. Good for you. Lots of alerts and alarms on your phone. Lata. I do lists at work. I work at a kindergarten, so I won't forget to do something, and then my anxiety rears its ugly head when I see how long the list is. Yeah, that is really tough. And so what happens when we have a really big list is we have to break it down. There's no other way. We need to take things off that list based on what's urgent and important. So what's the deadline? Was there an emergency? And put those at the top of a list, and then put things underneath afterwards. Gina, probably use backwards design if I don't get overwhelmed. Don't get overwhelmed. Just use it for one thing. Just like, let's say you have an appointment one day, just use it for that one thing and then see how it works. Veronica, I make lists for what needs to be done when they need to be done by. Yes, okay, great. And then I mark it off when I get them done. I also put things in certain places due to OCD. Okay. So I know where they are always at, so my anxiety doesn't get the better of me. Great. All right. Terrific. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about some interventions for making schedules that make sense. So we're not really talking about procrastination today, but I do want to just point out that having a schedule can reduce procrastination because you do this brain dump, you identify what's critical to do right now, emergencies and crises, and you break those tasks down into smaller pieces. And with a smaller chunk of work as your goal, you can set a start or a stop time. You'll find that you can summon the motivation to begin more easily. And so we want to use our technology to help us manage our time. We need to create some phrases to talk back to the negative part of yourself. So maybe say, yes, I can do this. I've done blah, blah, blah in the past. Or I've set my timers. I have my one goal. I'm going to get started with something. Anything, because that's the key with procrastination. Get started with anything, and that is how you break out of the cycle. You want to think about a time when you were putting a lot of pressure on yourself to do something just right, and so you didn't do it at all. And so the reason I want you to think about that is because I then want you to think about a time when you put pressure on yourself to do something just right and it didn't work out and it was okay. Nothing terrible happened. Can you put that in the chat? What is a time when you felt the need to do something perfectly or you procrastinated? What happened when it didn't work out? How bad was the thing that you imagined it would be? A lot of my clients with anxiety imagine things are going to be much worse than they actually turn out to be. Holly says, I've tried to make a list, but when it's time for them, I never get to them. And I would love to do the list, but I get my anxiety and everything in my mind gets really mixed up. That sounds really tough, Holly. Lynn, I guess I need to do a brain dump. Things run around in my mind and it overwhelms me and I can't even decide where to start. Absolutely, Lynn. When I think about a brain dump, I think of that scene from Harry Potter where Dumbledore puts his wand to his head and he pulls out a memory and he puts it in the, I don't know, the thing, and the memory kind of comes to life and Harry looks at the memory. I think about that when we think about our to-do lists or in scheduling. Like, can we pull out something, one thing, and then break it down, and then pull out the next thing and then break that down? So how do we create routine schedules and routines that really work? We want to really sort of aim for a balance between the levels of difficulty that are associated with various tasks. So some tasks are easy for you, some tasks are medium, and some tasks are hard. And the problem is when the hard thing is due right away, you get stuck, basically leaving it till the last minute. So it's due right away and the cortisol kicks in and you've got this energy and you get it done, but you've been through a lot of stress and worry till you get there. And so what we want to do is really think about what tasks are easy for me? And if I do an easy task, is that going to warm me up to do something that's a little more challenging later? Or do I like to do that challenging thing first and then something easy? So we really want to think about, what order do you like to do things in? What helps you get moving? And why don't you put that in the chat? What will help you create some balance between these activities? So you do it, Holly says you do everything at the last minute. Right, but doing everything at the last minute is very stressful for your brain. And if you slowed things down and you zoomed out to look at the bigger picture, you'd be able to say, this is the thing that actually is the thing I want to work on the most. And maybe the thing you want to work on the most is getting to those basketball games. That's your number one goal. What are you going to do that? So I'd like you to think about one thing about scheduling that's hard for you, and I want you to put it in the chat, because I'd like to sort of start to do a little bit of some interventions around things where people get stuck scheduling. So one of the challenges is that people want to change a number of things about themselves at the same time. And how many things can we change? One. So what is the one thing that we are going to focus on, and you're going to walk away from this Facebook Live with, that you are going to work on? What is the one thing that you want to change? Delane says, self-talk, telling myself repeatedly that I can do it. I've done this before. Fantastic. I think that is a great, great intervention. I love that so much. Thank you. Sarah, getting moving isn't the issue as much as task completion. Okay, I get started, then I get stuck, then I move on to another plan or project. Yes, and then you don't go back to the thing that you were doing. And so one of the things that what you're talking about then is, sustained attention, or it could be goal-directed persistence. So you get started, and then you need a break. And so what happens is that when you're stuck, what you actually need to do is to make a change in your environment, get up, go to the bathroom, get a glass of water, get a coffee, leave some notes about what you were doing, or figure out who you could talk to about the stuck place where you are. Who could you talk to? Who might offer you some support? Sometimes it helps to not, if you're really stuck, to take a break and do something else. But then you're going to need a reminder on your phone to get back to the first thing. Elaine, it's hard to do things that will be emotional, like making a will. Those are the hardest. It is hard to do that. Believe me, I understand. It's hard to do things that are emotional because we don't want to think about that, right? We don't want to think that we might not be here. I don't really want to make a will. And yet, we all know people whose family members died without a will and how horrible that was for them. Gina, I'm going to try the backwards design one more time this week for an appointment. Beautiful. One time you're going to try it for an appointment. That doesn't mean if it doesn't work, you're going to throw it out the window, right? You're going to try it this week for an appointment. We'll see how it goes. If it works, great. If some of it works, but not all of it works, that doesn't mean we get rid of it. It means you just need to pivot. You need to circle back, make a change. Good luck to you. Veronica, you're going to try backwards design. Holly, if my family understood it, it would be so much easier, but my dad thinks I just don't want to do it. But I do, and I would love for him to see that I'm trying my best. But it's your ADHD, your anxiety, depression, and OCD that keeps you from doing them. So, Holly, education is a great thing, and Attitude has so many resources for adults with ADHD to share with their parents. So I would encourage you to check that out. Lata, I start a project, but find myself several hours later doing something entirely different and nothing gets done. So that means that you get stuck in quadrant 3, right? It's still urgent, but urgent and important, not urgent and important. It's urgent, it's not urgent, but it's important. You get distracted by things. It's the quadrant of distraction. And so I think that what would help is if you set some timers for when you're working on something, and then you pause to see where you're going, because your ADHD brain is wandering off into other areas that are very interesting and important to do, but they're away from the thing that you need to do. So in that case, what you want to do is use something. There's an app called Rescue Time, or you could use the Pomodoro method, the tomato timer, so that you work for a chunk of time, like 30 minutes, and then you pause and let your brain clear, and then you can come back to it rather than going off. Again, use technology to assist you. Okay, just getting on. Can you repeat backwards design? Yes, Danielle. Backwards design is when you start with your end point. So I need to be at my friend's for dinner at 6. It takes about 10 minutes to get there. So I have to be, that's 5:50. It's going to take me about 20 minutes to pull all the things together that I need to bring for the dinner. That's going to be 5:30. It's going to take me 15 minutes to wrap up my work week and do my schedule. And then I have to sort of see if there's any urgent emails I want to answer. So that's another 15 minutes. So that means I have to get ready for that dinner at 5 o'clock, which means we're going to have to stop soon. Crystal says, getting started has been the hardest for me. I end up in complete overwhelm or doing something different. So Crystal, what I really want to suggest to you is that you break things down into smaller pieces. You're overwhelmed and you do something different that seems easier, and it's fine to do something easy to warm up, but then you need to shift to something harder. So whatever is harder has to be broken down into smaller and smaller steps. Holly, I'm going to try the backwards design, and maybe that would help me show my family that I'm trying to make life better. And I would encourage you, those of you who want to try backwards design, and which is helpful in executing a schedule, to start with one thing, one appointment, one goal, one basketball game, I guess, and then see how that works. And don't expect perfection. Expect that you're going to stumble, because time management is hard. And so many of you have talked about how schedules are difficult. So I think it's really important to really be able to start off with something that is that you can try, so that you can feel a sense of progress. Because what happens is when you don't feel a sense of progress, you'll give up. And that's what we don't want to see. I don't want to see you giving up. And for those of you whose families don't really understand, I would strongly encourage you to share with them, sorry, I'm looking for my downloadable, which I realized I forgot to share with everybody. So here it is. Here's my downloadable. To share with people some of the resources here on attitude, so that they know they can learn a little bit more. Their job is to learn. It's not your job necessarily to teach them everything. You can share what your experience is, but when they put the onus on you to explain everything to them, then they're not really demonstrating how they might be able to really show up for you. And here we're talking about showing up. So thank you so much. Natasha says, my goal is to do enough work in advance at my job so I can stop losing sleep and staying up late for 1 to 3 days before a deadline. I think my first step, let's see. I think my first step might be to stop hyper-focusing on unrelated personal distractions. Yeah, so turn off the distractions, turn off your phone, hide your fun stuff in a different browser, use timers. There's lots of tools on the internet, and help yourself by using them. Delane says, a friend advised me to never put more than 3 things on the list that you take or carry with you. Sometimes drink water is one thing. It's a confidence builder. This has been very helpful. That's fantastic, Delane. Thank you so much for sharing that.